I spent 25 years as a detective. I thought I'd seen everything. I was wrong. The rain was coming down hard when I pulled up to my daughter's house, a modern two-story in Portland's West Hills neighborhood. The kind of place that screamed new money and good taste. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the water stream down the windshield, trying to calm the nerves I hadn't felt since my first homicide scene. This was just dinner. Just meeting my daughter's husband for the first time. Just trying to repair a relationship I'd neglected for too many years. Jessica had invited me 3 weeks ago. "Dad, I want you to meet Ethan," she'd said, her voice cautious but hopeful. "I know things have been difficult between us, but he's my husband now. And I want you to be part of our lives. Part of our lives." After missing her college graduation because of a case, after skipping her wedding because she hadn't invited me, or maybe because I'd given her every reason not to, after years of phone calls that went to voicemail, and birthdays marked only by cards that arrived a week late. I was 55 years old, retired from Portland PD's missing persons unit, and I had exactly one person left in this world who shared my blood. I wasn't going to screw this up. The front door opened before I reached it. Jessica stood in the doorway, 31 years old and looking more like her mother every day. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a smile that used to light up every room she entered. That smile was more guarded now, but it was there. "Dad." She stepped forward and hugged me. It was brief, a little stiff, but it was real. "I'm glad you came. Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart." Behind her, a man appeared. Tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of dark hair that looked professionally styled and a jawline that belonged in a magazine. He wore a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly pension. And when he smiled, it was the smile of someone who'd practiced it in mirrors. "Mr. Donovan." He extended his hand. "Ethan Cross. I've heard so much about you." His grip was firm. His eyes were warm. Everything about him was polished, perfected, designed to impress. And something in my gut, that instinct honed by 25 years of interviewing killers and liars and monsters who wore human faces, that instinct went cold. "Good to meet you, Ethan," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Thanks for having me." The house was everything I'd expected. Open floor plan, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked like it came from a catalog, a wine collection displayed behind glass, art on the walls that I didn't understand, but knew was expensive. "Ethan founded a cybersecurity company," Jessica explained, as we moved toward the dining room. "Crosstech Solutions. They protect Fortune 500 companies from hackers." "Sounds complicated," I said. "It's actually quite simple," Ethan replied smoothly. "People think they're safe behind their passwords and firewalls. They're not. My job is to find the cracks before the bad guys do." "Find the cracks." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. Dinner was roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. Jessica's cooking, not his. I could tell by the way she hovered over each dish. Ethan poured wine that probably cost more than my truck payment and made conversation that was charming, intelligent, self-deprecating in all the right places. He was perfect. Too perfect. Halfway through the meal, Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, I need to take this." "Work. Emergency." He stood, already moving toward the back door. "I'll just be a minute." "Of course, honey," Jessica said. He stepped outside, closing the door behind him, and I watched through the rain-streaked glass as he paced the patio, the phone pressed to his ear. That's when I saw it. His other phone. It was sitting on the counter beside the wine bottle, a different device than the one he'd taken outside. Probably his personal phone, left behind while he dealt with work. The screen was lit up, unlocked, displaying what looked like a web browser. I shouldn't have looked. I know I shouldn't have looked. But 25 years of instinct don't switch off just because you've turned in your badge. I stood up slowly, pretending to stretch, and moved toward the counter. Jessica was focused on cutting the chicken, her back to me. The phone screen was bright in the dim kitchen. A Google search page. The words burned into my brain like a brand. How long before a body decomposes in a sealed container? I stopped breathing. Below that search, in the history, I could see others. Airtight storage containers large. Missing persons, cold cases, Oregon. How to avoid leaving DNA evidence. The back door opened. Ethan stepped inside, shaking rain from his hair, his work phone sliding back into his pocket. "Sorry about that," he said with an apologetic smile. Crisis averted. Now, where were we? He walked to the counter, picked up his personal phone without glancing at it, and slipped it into his other pocket. Smooth, casual, like he hadn't just been researching how to dispose of a body. "Dad?" Jessica was staring at me. "Are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. The hardest smile of my life. "Fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Long drive." The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I laughed at Ethan's jokes. I complimented Jessica's cooking. I played the part of a grateful father reconnecting with his daughter, while inside my mind was screaming. When I finally left, Ethan shook my hand at the door with that perfect smile. "It was great meeting you, Mr. Donovan. I hope we'll see more of each other." "Count on it," I said. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Rain hammered the roof of my truck like a drumbeat, and all I could see was that phone screen. How long before a body decomposes? My daughter was married to this man. She lived with him. She slept beside him every night. And I had no idea what he was planning or for whom, but I was damn sure going to find out. The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't facing armed criminals. It was smiling at the man I suspected of murder while he carved the roast. I didn't go home that night. I drove to a diner off Burnside, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and stared at the rain until the waitress started giving me worried looks. Then I drove back to Jessica's neighborhood, parked 3 streets away, and watched her house until the lights went out at 11:30. What was I going to do? Call 911 and report a Google search? "Hello, officer." My son-in-law looked up body decomposition. "Please arrest him immediately." They'd laugh me off the phone. I would have laughed too, 3 days ago, but I'd spent 25 years reading people, interviewing suspects who smiled while describing how they'd strangled their wives, sitting across from men who coached Little League on weekends and buried bodies on weeknights. I knew what evil looked like when it wore a human face. Ethan Cross was wearing that face. The next morning, I called Jessica and asked if I could come back for dinner. "I feel like we barely got to talk last night," I said, hating the manipulation in my own voice. "And I'd love to get to know Ethan better." The pause on her end told me she was surprised. Pleased, but surprised. "That would be great, Dad. Ethan would love that." "How about tomorrow night?" "Perfect." I spent the next 36 hours preparing. Not physically, I just needed to show up. But mentally, I ran through every scenario, every question I could ask, every reaction I needed to watch for. I'd interrogated hundreds of suspects in my career. This was no different, except it was. Because if I was wrong, I'd destroy my relationship with my daughter forever. And if I was right, my daughter was living with a monster. Saturday night arrived cold and wet. Typical Portland October. I brought a bottle of wine that cost more than I usually spent, and I made sure to compliment everything. The house, the furniture, Ethan's collection of rare whiskeys displayed in a glass cabinet. "You've done well for yourself," I told him as he poured me a glass of something amber and expensive. "I got lucky," Ethan said with practiced humility. "Right place, right time." "And Jessica tells me you're expanding." "International clients?" "A few. SKB. Singapore, London, Dubai." He swirled his whiskey. "Corporations are finally realizing that cybersecurity isn't optional. It's survival." Survival. The word hung in the air. I watched him throughout dinner. The way he touched Jessica's arm when she spoke gentle, possessive. The The way his eyes tracked her movements around the kitchen. The way he interrupted her stories with small corrections that seemed helpful but weren't. Actually, honey, that was in March, not April. I think you're remembering that wrong, sweetheart. What Jess means is small things, subtle things, the kind of things that eroded a person's confidence, drip by drip, until they couldn't trust their own memories anymore. I'd seen this pattern before. In case files, in victim interviews, in women who'd been found too late. So, Ethan, I said casually, cutting into my steak. A flicker in his eyes. So brief, I might have imagined it. The Cascades, he said smoothly. About 2 hours east. I bought it a few years ago. Great for getting away from the city when things get hectic. Must be nice. You two go up there often? Not as much as I'd like. Ethan glanced at Jessica. Jess isn't really a wilderness person. Are you? Honey, I went once. Jessica said. It was. Isolated. Beautiful, but isolated. She got spooked by the lack of cell service. Ethan laughed, warm, indulgent. City girl through and through. I filed that away. Isolated cabin. No cell service. Jessica had only been there once. What happened at that cabin that Ethan didn't want her to see? After dinner, Ethan excused himself to take a work call. The same pattern as before. This time, I didn't look at his phone. Instead, I looked at my daughter. Jess, I said quietly. Are you happy? She looked up from loading the dishwasher, surprised by the question. What? Of course I'm happy. Why would you ask that? Just checking. That's what fathers do. You never checked before. The words hit like a punch. She was right. I hadn't. I'd been too busy chasing other people's missing daughters to pay attention to my own. I know, I said. Jessica's expression softened slightly. Dad, I know. Ethan seems intense, but he loves me. He takes care of me. After Mom left, after you and I stopped talking, I felt so alone. Ethan was there. Ethan was there, filling the void I'd created. I just want you to be safe, sweetheart. I am safe. She smiled, but something in her eyes didn't quite match. This is the safest I've ever felt. The back door opened. Ethan stepped inside, shaking rain from his jacket. All sorted, he announced. Another crisis averted. Mike, can I freshen your drink? I should probably head out, I said, standing. Early morning tomorrow. Of course. Ethan walked me to the door. His hand rested on my shoulder, a gesture of warmth that felt like a warning. Drive safe out there. Roads get slick this time of year. I've been driving these roads for 30 years, Ethan. I know how to handle myself. His smile widened. I'm sure you do. I walked to my truck, feeling his eyes on my back the whole way. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was still standing in the doorway, watching, not waving, watching. I drove 2 miles before I pulled over and wrote down everything I'd observed. The controlling behavior, the isolated cabin, Jessica's hesitation when she said she was happy, and underneath all my notes, I wrote a name that had been nagging at the back of my mind since I'd seen those search results. Zara Chen. 3 years ago. Woman reported missing by her father. Husband claimed she'd left him. Body never found. Case went cold. The husband was a tech entrepreneur. The husband's name was Ethan Cross. I needed to find that file. At 3 a.m., I pulled out a file I hadn't touched in 2 years. A woman who vanished without a trace. Her husband's name was in that file. I just never connected it until now. Sleep wasn't coming. I'd tried lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hammer my apartment roof like an accusation. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's smile, that perfect, practiced smile. Finally, I gave up. I pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, made coffee strong enough to dissolve a spoon, and went to the spare bedroom I'd converted into a home office. The room was floor-to-ceiling boxes. 25 years of case files I couldn't let go. Cold cases, unsolved disappearances, the ones that haunted me. Sarah Chen's file was in the third box I opened. I remembered the case. Of course I remembered it. A 32-year-old immigration lawyer, reported missing by her father in October 2021. She'd told friends she was going hiking alone in the Cascades, a trip to clear her head after marital problems. She never came back. Her car was found abandoned at a trailhead 2 weeks later. Her hiking gear was gone. Search and rescue combed the mountains for a month before calling off the effort. The official conclusion: accident. She'd probably fallen somewhere remote, the body lost to the wilderness. But her father, Tommy Chen, never believed it. He came to the station every month for a year, demanding updates, insisting we look harder at the husband. She was leaving him, Tommy had said, his voice cracking. She told me. She was afraid. And then she disappears? That's not coincidence. We'd looked at the husband. Of course we had. Ethan Cross, founder of some tech startup, had a rock-solid alibi for the day Sarah went missing. He'd been in San Francisco at a conference, 50 witnesses confirming his presence. His phone records, credit cards, everything checked out. There was nothing to connect him to Sarah's disappearance. Nothing but a grieving father's suspicion. I'd felt bad closing that case. It had sat on my desk for months, the folder growing thicker with Tommy Chen's increasingly desperate letters. Eventually, it joined the boxes. Another ghost I couldn't save. Now I spread the contents across my desk, looking at it with new eyes. Sarah Chen stared up at me from her photo. Dark hair, sharp eyes, a smile that lit up the frame. She looked like Jessica. The similarity hit me like a physical blow. Same height, 5'6". Same build, slender, athletic. Same dark hair worn long. Same bright, confident smile. I pulled up Jessica's Facebook photos on my laptop and placed them side by side. They could have been sisters. Jesus Christ, I whispered. I read through the file with growing horror. Sarah had married Ethan after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. Friends described her as blissfully happy at first, then increasingly isolated. She'd stopped returning calls, missed her father's birthday, quit her book club. By the time she vanished, she had almost no one left, except Ethan. The pattern was identical. Charm, control, isolate. I found Tommy Chen's contact information in the file. It was after 4 a.m., too early to call. I waited, watching the clock tick towards something resembling a reasonable hour. At 7, I dialed. Hello? The voice that answered was thick with sleep and something else. The weariness of a man who'd stopped hoping but couldn't stop waiting. Mr. Chen? This is Mike Donovan. I was the lead detective on your daughter's case. Silence. Then, Detective Donovan. I remember you. A pause. You were the only one who listened. I need to talk to you about Sarah. About Ethan Cross. The silence that followed was loaded with 3 years of grief, frustration, and desperate hope. What's changed? Tommy asked quietly. My daughter married him. I heard a sharp intake of breath. Your daughter. I saw something. Mr. Chen. On his phone. Search history about body decomposition. Avoiding DNA evidence. I gripped the phone tighter. I think your instincts were right. I think Ethan did something to Sarah. And I think my daughter might be next. Tommy Chen didn't respond for a long moment. When he did, his voice was steady, the voice of a man who'd had 3 years to prepare for this conversation. Come to my house, detective. I have things to show you. Things the police wouldn't look at. Things I've been collecting since my daughter vanished. What kind of things? Evidence. Photographs. Sarah's journal, the real one, not the fake one Ethan gave to the police. His voice hardened. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to believe me. Someone who could actually do something. I wrote down his address, a house in Beaverton, 20 minutes away. I'll be there in an hour, I said. Detective. Tommy's voice stopped me before I could hang up. My daughter isn't dead. I know everyone thinks she is. I know the search was called off, the case closed. But I'm her father. I would know if she was gone. I would feel it. I thought about Jessica. About the bond between parent and child that survives distance, silence, even years of neglect. I believe you, Mr. Chen. Tommy. Call me, Tommy. After I hung up, I sat at my desk, surrounded by the remnants of a case I'd given up on. Sarah Chen's photo watched me from the file. Those dark eyes, that familiar smile. 3 years. She'd been missing for 3 years. If she was dead, her body had never been found. No trace of her anywhere. Her body had never been found. Her body had never been found. But if she wasn't dead, if Ethan had done something else, something worse than murder, I thought about the cabin in the Cascades. Isolated. No cell service. A place Jessica had visited only once and found unsettling. I thought about the search history on Ethan's phone. Body decomposition. Sealed containers. How to avoid leaving DNA. A horrifying possibility began to form in my mind. One I didn't want to consider. One I couldn't ignore. What if Sarah Chen wasn't decomposing? What if she was still alive, trapped somewhere, hidden, waiting for someone to find her? And what if Ethan was searching those things, not because he'd killed someone, but because he was planning to? I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Tommy Chen had waited 3 years for answers. I wasn't going to make him wait another hour. Nina Patel hadn't seen Jessica in 3 months. He's always there, she said. Every time I try to meet her alone, something comes up. Before driving to Tommy Chen's house, I made one stop. Jessica's maid of honor, a woman named Nina Patel, I'd found through Facebook photos of the wedding I wasn't invited to. She worked at a marketing agency downtown, and I caught her during her morning coffee run. Mr. Donovan? She looked confused when I approached her outside the Starbucks on Southwest Broadway. I'm sorry. Do I know you? I'm Jessica's father. I need to talk to you about Ethan. Her face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief. Maybe. Or recognition. Like she'd been waiting for someone to ask. Not here, she said quietly. There's a park around the corner. We walked to a small green space tucked between office buildings. Nina clutched her coffee like a lifeline, her knuckles white against the paper cup. I've been worried about her, Nina said before I could ask anything. For months. But every time I try to bring it up, she shuts me down. She says I'm being paranoid. As in mind, tell me what you've seen. Nina took a deep breath. When Jess first started dating Ethan, she was glowing. He was perfect, romantic, attentive, showered her with gifts. He took her to Paris for their 3rd date. Paris. She shook her head. I was jealous, honestly. We all were. When did that change? Gradually. So gradually, I didn't notice at first. Nina stared at her coffee. She stopped coming to girls' nights, said she was busy. Then she stopped answering texts. Right away, she used to respond within minutes. But suddenly, it was hours. Days sometimes. Did she explain why? Always an excuse. Work was crazy. Ethan had planned something. She wasn't feeling well. Nina's voice hardened. But then I noticed other things. She'd ask permission before ordering food at restaurants. She'd check her phone constantly, like she was waiting for something. Or afraid of missing something. The pattern. The same pattern from Sarah Chen's file. I confronted her once, Nina continued. About 6 months ago, I said I was worried, that she seemed different. She got so defensive, said I didn't understand their relationship, that Ethan just loved her intensely. She laughed bitterly. Intensely. That's one word for it. Did you ever see him do anything specific? Anything threatening? Nina hesitated. Once, at their housewarming party, I was looking for the bathroom, and I walked past his office. The door was open. He was on his computer, and when he saw me, he reacted. Just for a second. His face went completely cold. Then he smiled and asked if I needed help finding anything. But that look, she shuddered. I've never forgotten it. What was on the computer? I don't know. I only saw it for a second. Some kind of map, I think. Or floor plans. I'm not sure. Floor plans. My mind went to the cabin. What if he wasn't just planning something? What if he'd already built something? Nina, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. The question hung in the morning air. Nina's eyes filled with tears. I think she's already in danger, she whispered. I think she has been for a while, but she can't see it. She loves him, and he's very, very good at making her believe that love means this. This? Control. Isolation. Making her world so small that he's the only thing in it. Nina wiped her eyes. That's not love, Mr. Donovan. That's ownership. I gave Nina my card and asked her to call if anything changed, if Jessica reached out, if she noticed anything unusual. She promised she would. Mr. Donovan, she called as I walked away. Can you actually do something? I've felt so helpless, watching her disappear into that relationship, knowing something was wrong but not being able to prove it. I'm going to try, I said. I'm going to do everything I can. I drove to Tommy Chen's house with Nina's words echoing in my head. Ownership. That was exactly what this was. Ethan didn't love Jessica any more than he'd loved Sarah. He collected them, possessed them, and when they tried to leave, Tommy's house was a modest ranch in Beaverton, the lawn overgrown, the paint peeling, the home of a man who'd stopped caring about appearances, who had only one focus left in his life. He opened the door before I knocked. 62 years old, but he looked 80. Grief had carved deep lines in his face, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd been waiting in the dark for 3 years. Detective Donovan. Come in. The living room had been converted into a command center. Photos of Sarah covered one wall, childhood pictures, graduation, her wedding to Ethan, then nothing. A timeline was drawn on a whiteboard, noting every detail of her disappearance. Boxes of documents were stacked in the corners. I've been investigating on my own, Tommy said, following my gaze. The police gave up. I couldn't. What did you find? He walked to the whiteboard and pointed to a date circled in red. October 15th, 2021. The day Sarah supposedly went hiking alone. Except she didn't. What do you mean? I talked to her the night before. She was scared. She said she'd told Ethan she wanted a divorce, and he'd taken it badly. Really badly. Tommy's voice cracked. She said she was going to stay with her cousin in Seattle. Not hiking. Seattle. But her car was found at the trailhead. Exactly. Tommy's eyes blazed. Someone drove her car there. Someone wanted us to think she went into those mountains. But my daughter was terrified of heights. She hated hiking. She never would have gone alone. He handed me a photograph. Sarah and Ethan on their wedding day. Smiling. Perfect. Look at his eyes. Tommy said. Really look. I did. And beneath the smile, beneath the charm, I saw exactly what I'd seen at dinner with Ethan and Jessica. Emptiness. Cold, calculated emptiness. He took my daughter, Tommy said. And I think she's still out there, somewhere, waiting for someone to find her. I looked at the wall of photos. At Sarah's face, frozen, in happier times. Then let's find her. Tommy Chen opened the door with the eyes of a man who'd stopped hoping, but couldn't stop searching. We sat in his kitchen, surrounded by the debris of a 3-year obsession. Coffee-stained notebooks, printed emails, phone records obtained through a private investigator who'd taken Tommy's retirement savings and delivered nothing useful. The police said I was crazy, Tommy said, pouring coffee into chipped mugs. Grieving father who couldn't accept his daughter was dead. But I know my Sarah. She wasn't some careless hiker who wandered off a cliff. Tell me about her relationship with Ethan. From the beginning. Tommy sank into his chair like a man settling into a grave. They met at a tech conference in San Francisco. Sarah was there for work, immigration law, lots of tech clients. Ethan swept her off her feet. Flowers every day. Surprise trips. He made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. When did things change? Slowly. So slowly, I didn't see it happening. Tommy stared into his coffee. First, she stopped calling as often. Then, she missed Christmas, said Ethan, had planned something special. Just the two of them. Then, her mother's death anniversary. He paused. And I saw his jaw tighten against the tide of memory. Her mother died when Sarah was 16. Every year, we'd visit the grave together. Every year, for 15 years. Until Ethan. Did you confront her about it? I tried. She got defensive. Said I didn't understand their relationship. Said Ethan needed her. That he'd had a difficult childhood and struggled with abandonment. Tommy laughed bitterly. She was always making excuses for him, explaining away his behavior. I didn't realize then that he'd programmed her to do it. I recognized the pattern. The isolation, the excuses, the slow erosion of identity until the victim couldn't distinguish their own thoughts from their abuser's manipulation. When did she decide to leave him? Tommy reached into a folder and pulled out a worn notebook floral cover, well-thumbed pages. This is Sarah's real journal, not the one Ethan gave the police, full of happy entries about their marriage. This one was hidden in a storage unit she'd rented without his knowledge. He handed it to me like it was sacred. And in a way, it was the final testament of a woman who'd seen the truth too late. I opened to a random page. Sarah's handwriting was neat, precise, the penmanship of a lawyer. But as I flipped forward, I could see it deteriorating. The lines grew shaky, the words more frantic. The 15th of March, 2021. I found cameras today. In the bedroom. In the bathroom. He's been watching me. Recording me. When I asked him about it, he laughed and said it was for security. Security from what? We live in a gated community. The only threat in this house is him. April doi. Doa mi doazich. Shiunu. He knows I've been talking to Dad. I don't know how I only use the phone at work now, but he made a comment at dinner about keeping family at the right distance. His eyes were so cold, I'm scared to call anyone anymore. The 28th of June. 2021. I told him I want a divorce. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just smiled and said, "That's not how this works, Sarah. You don't leave me. Ever." Then he went to his office like nothing had happened. I've never been more terrified in my life. The 14th of October 2021. Tomorrow I'm going to Seattle. I've packed a bag and hidden it in my car. I told Ethan I'm going hiking, alone, to clear my head. He seemed to believe me. God, I hope he believed me. If I can just get to Emily's house, I'll be safe. I'll file for divorce from there. I'll never come back to this place. I'm so scared. But I'm more scared of staying. The entry ended there. October 14th. The day before, she vanished. She never made it to Seattle, I said. No. Tommy's voice was barely a whisper. Emily, her cousin, called me on October 16th. Sarah never showed up. That's when I knew something was wrong. When I called the police. And Ethan had an alibi. Ironclad. 50 witnesses at a conference in San Francisco. Tommy's fists clenched on the table. But he could have hired someone. He could have arranged it remotely. He's a tech genius. He brags about it constantly. You think he couldn't figure out how to make his wife disappear? I thought about what Nina had said. The floor plans on Ethan's computer. The isolated cabin with no cell service. The cabin, I said. Did Sarah ever mention it? Tommy's eyes lit up. Once. She said Ethan took her there when they were dating. She thought it was romantic at first, this secret getaway in the mountains. But then she noticed. Things. What things? She said there was a room that was always locked. Ethan told her it was storage hunting equipment, he said. But Sarah heard sounds once. like something moving beneath the floor. Tommy leaned forward. She asked him about it, and he got angry, really angry. It was the first time she'd seen that side of him. After that, she never went back. Sounds beneath the floor. A locked room. A cabin in the mountains where no one could hear you scream. Did you tell the police about the cabin? Of course. They searched it. Found nothing unusual. Said it was just a normal vacation property. Tommy's voice cracked with frustration. But they only looked once. One afternoon. What if they missed something? What if there's a basement? Or a bunker? Or, he couldn't finish. 3 years of hope and despair had worn him down to the bone. I reached across the table and gripped his shoulder. Tommy, I'm going to find out what's in that cabin. I'm going to find out what happened to Sarah. And your daughter, Jessica? I thought about Jessica's smile that didn't reach her eyes. About Nina's words. That's not love. That's ownership. I'm going to save her too, I said. Before she ends up like Sarah. Tommy looked at me with tears streaming down his weathered face. 3 years, he said. 3 years. I've been waiting for someone to say that. To actually mean it. I mean it, I said. I promise you, Tommy. I mean every word. It was a promise I intended to keep, even if it killed me. Carmen Reyes was the best partner I ever had. She was also the only one who'd believe me when I said a tech CEO might be keeping his wife in a hole somewhere. I found her at her desk in the missing persons unit. Buried under paperwork, like always. The bullpen hadn't changed much since I'd left. Same flickering fluorescent lights. Same coffee that tasted like motor oil. Same photos of the missing staring down from the walls. Carmen looked up when I knocked on her cubicle wall. 42 years old, sharp eyes, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She'd been my partner for 8 years before I retired. And she'd saved my life. Twice. Once with her gun, once with her instincts. Mike Donovan. A smile cracked her serious face. Thought you were supposed to be fishing somewhere. Living the retired life. Got something better to do. I dropped into the chair beside her desk. I need your help, Carmen. Off the books. Her smile faded. She knew me well enough to hear the gravity in my voice. Talk to me. I laid it all out. The dinner with Jessica. Ethan's phone. The search history. Sarah Chen's cold case. Tommy's investigation. The cabin in the Cascades. The sounds beneath the floor. Carmen listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Jesus. Mike, she said when I finished. You're telling me your daughter married a guy who might have kidnapped his first wife? And kept her alive somewhere for 3 years? I know how it sounds. It sounds insane. She leaned back in her chair. But I've worked this job long enough to know that insane doesn't mean impossible. Will you help me? Carmen was quiet for a long moment. I could see her weighing the risks, her career, her pension, the rules she'd sworn to uphold. Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a notepad. What do you need? Property records. Everything Ethan Cross owns. The cabin in the Cascades. I need the exact location. Blueprints if they exist. Any permits he's pulled in the last 5 years. That's going to raise flags if I request it officially. Then, don't do it officially. Carmen gave me a long look. You know I could lose my badge for this. I know. And I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. I met her eyes. Carmen, my daughter, is living with this man, sleeping next to him every night, and I think his first wife is rotting in a hole somewhere because she tried to leave him. I can't let that happen to Jessica. She sighed heavily. You always did know how to guilt-trip me, Donovan. Is that a yes? That's a, give me 24 hours and don't call me on my work phone. She scribbled a number on a sticky note and handed it to me. Burner. I'll text you when I have something. Thank you. Carmen, don't thank me yet. Her expression hardened. If you're right about this guy, we need more than hunches and old case files. We need evidence. Hard evidence that'll hold up in court. I know. And if you're wrong, she trailed off. If I'm wrong, I'll have destroyed my relationship with my daughter for nothing. I stood up. But I don't think I'm wrong. My gut's been screaming since the moment I saw that search history. Your gut. Carmen almost smiled. That gut closed more cases than half the detectives in this building combined. Let's hope it's still working. I was halfway out the door when Carmen called after me. Mike. One more thing. I turned. If this guy is what you think he is, if he's been keeping someone alive and hidden for 3 years, then he's not just dangerous. He's organized, methodical, patient. Her voice was grim. Men like that don't make mistakes. And they don't let witnesses walk away. I know. So watch your back. And watch your daughter. Because if Cross realizes you're onto him, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I drove home with Carmen's warning echoing in my head. Organized, methodical, patient. She was right. Ethan wasn't some impulsive killer who acted in rage. He was a planner, a builder. He'd constructed his perfect life the same way he'd constructed his company. Brick by brick, detail by detail. And somewhere in that construction was a room for keeping women who tried to leave. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Dad, Ethan and I want to have you over for dinner again this weekend. He says you two really connected. Maybe Saturday? XX. I stared at the message, my stomach churning. He says, you two really connected. Was that genuine? Or was Ethan testing me, keeping me close to see if I suspected anything? I typed back. Saturday sounds great, sweetheart. Looking forward to it. Keep your enemies close. That was the old saying. And right now, Ethan Cross was the most dangerous enemy I'd ever faced. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bottle of bourbon I didn't drink and photos I couldn't stop looking at. Jessica, at 6 years old, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair, laughing like the world was made of cotton candy and Ferris wheels. 2 women, both trapped by the same man, in different ways. Sarah was trapped somewhere physical, a bunker, a basement, a hole in the ground. Jessica was trapped somewhere psychological, a web of manipulation so subtle she couldn't even see the threads. I had to free them both. My phone buzzed again. Carmen's burner number. Found something. Cross filed building permits 4 years ago for storm shelter at cabin property. 800 SQFT. Underground. Concrete walls. Ventilation system. Reinforced steel door. Mike, that's not a storm shelter. That's a prison. I read the message 3 times, my hands shaking. 800 square feet. Underground. Concrete. Steel. Sarah Chen had been missing for 3 years, and I knew exactly where she was. The property records showed a cabin 40 miles from the nearest town. No electricity grid, no phone lines. The kind of place where someone could disappear forever. Carmen came through with everything I needed. Building permits, property surveys, satellite images. She'd pulled strings I didn't want to know about to get them. We met at a diner outside the city, a place where cops and criminals alike came to conduct business that couldn't happen in daylight. Here's what I found. Carmen slid a folder across the table. The property is 63 acres in the Cascade Range, about 12 miles from Mount Hood. Ethan bought it 4 years ago, cash transaction. No mortgage. Paid $800,000. That's a lot of money for a weekend getaway. It gets better. She pulled out a blueprint. The permit application for the underground structure was filed 3 months after the purchase. He called it a storm shelter and emergency bunker. I studied the blueprint. The underground space was larger than my apartment, 800 square feet, divided into multiple rooms, living area, bathroom, storage, and one room labeled simply secure storage, with walls twice as thick as the others. What's the ventilation system for? According to the permit, it's for long-term occupancy during natural disasters. The bunker is designed to sustain 2 people for up to 6 months. Carmen's voice was flat, clinical, independent water filtration, solar-powered backup generator. The whole thing is built like a military installation, or a prison. She tapped the blueprint. Look at this. The main entrance is through the cabin. A hatch in the floor of what looks like a storage closet. But there's also an emergency exit here. About 50 yards from the main structure. Comes up in the woods, hidden by brush. Emergency exit. That meant ventilation. That meant Sarah, if she was down there, could survive. What about the search 3 years ago? I asked. The police checked the cabin after Sarah disappeared. Carmen's expression soured. I pulled the report. 2 officers, one afternoon. They walked through the cabin, checked the outbuildings, looked around the property. They noted a storage closet with heavy door, but didn't investigate further because the homeowner Ethan said it was a gun safe. They didn't open it. They didn't have a warrant. And Ethan was cooperative, charming, had an alibi for the day Sarah vanished. Carmen shook her head. They had no reason to dig deeper. Literally, I thought about Sarah Chen, 20 feet underground while police officers walked above her head. Had she heard them? Had she screamed, hoping someone would hear? Or had Ethan done something to keep her quiet, drugged her, gagged her? Worse, there's something else. Carmen pulled out another document. Cell tower records from the area. Ethan's phone pings a tower near the cabin every 2 weeks, like clockwork. Has for 3 years. Always on Saturdays. Always for about 4 hours. He's visiting her. That's my guess. Bringing supplies. Checking on his investment. Carmen's voice dripped with disgust. Mike, this guy has a routine. He's been doing this for 3 years without anyone noticing. That takes discipline. Discipline. Patience. Planning. Ethan Cross wasn't just a monster. He was a professional. I need to see that cabin, I said. I figured you'd say that. Carmen pulled out a map with a route highlighted in yellow. This is the access road. It's about a 2-hour drive from Portland, but the last 15 miles are unpaved. No cell service once you get past this point. She marked a spot on the map. And Mike, you can't go when he's there. If he catches you, I know. Do you? Because this isn't a drug dealer or a car thief. This is a man who's been keeping a woman captive for 3 years. A man who's methodical enough to visit on a schedule and smart enough to never leave evidence. Carmen grabbed my wrist. If he realizes you're on to him, he won't just run. He'll clean up. And that means Sarah dies. Maybe Jessica too. The weight of her words settled on my shoulders like a physical burden. So what do I do? Wait. You watch. You gather evidence. You find a way to confirm Sarah is down there without tipping him off. Carmen's grip tightened. And then you call me. And we do this by the book. Warrant. SWAT. The whole thing. We get Sarah out alive, and we put that bastard away forever. By the book. The right way. The safe way. But how long would that take? Weeks? Months? How many more Saturday visits would Sarah endure while I dotted I's and crossed T's? Carmen, what if we don't have time? What if he's planning something? Why would he be planning something now? He's had her for 3 years. He's got a new wife. Everything's. She stopped. Her eyes widened. The search history. Body. Decomposition. Exactly. My voice was grim. He's not searching that because of something he did in the past. He's searching it because of something he's planning for the future. You think he's going to kill Sarah? I think he's getting ready to. Maybe Jessica's the upgrade. Maybe keeping Sarah alive has become too risky. Maybe he just got bored. I thought about the charming smile, the empty eyes, whatever the reason. I don't think Sarah has much time left. Carmen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of a decision she didn't want to make. Okay, we move faster. I'll start working on probable cause for a warrant, the permit records, the cell tower data, the connection to Sarah's disappearance. But Mike, you have to promise me something. What? Don't go to that cabin alone. Don't confront Ethan without backup. Don't do anything that could get you killed or get Sarah killed. She held my gaze. Promise me. I thought about Jessica, about Sarah, about the darkness waiting beneath that cabin floor. I promise, I said. It was the first lie I'd told Carmen in 20 years, because I knew, deep in my gut, that by the book wasn't going to save Sarah Chen. Only I could do that. I laid the photos side by side. Sarah Chen, Jessica Donovan, same height, same build, same dark hair, same bright smile. He had a type, and my daughter was it. Back at my apartment, I created a war room of my own. Photos, timelines, documents, everything spread across my dining table like pieces of a puzzle that formed a picture of evil. Sarah Chen on the left, Jessica Donovan on the right. The similarities were uncanny. Both were 5'6", slender, athletic. Both had dark hair worn long, past their shoulders. Both had careers they were passionate about, Sarah in immigration law, Jessica in marketing. Both were independent, successful women who'd never needed a man to complete them. Until Ethan Cross. I created a timeline, drawing parallel lines between their relationships. Sarah met Ethan. Tech conference, San Francisco. 6 months later, married. Jessica met Ethan. Charity gala, Portland. 8 months later, married. Sarah's isolation began. Month 4. Stopped returning calls from friends. Missed family gatherings. Made excuses. Jessica's isolation began. Month 3. Nina hadn't seen her in months. Relationship with me had only recently thawed after I'd been absent for years, making isolation even easier. Sarah discovered cameras. Month 10. Ethan. Monitoring her. Every move. Jessica's phone. I thought about how she'd glanced at it constantly during dinner, like she was waiting for permission. Was Ethan tracking her too? Sarah attempted to leave. Month 16. You don't leave me. Ever, Jessica. Month 12 and counting. Still in the honeymoon phase of control. Still believing this was love. The pattern was identical. Ethan had perfected his technique with Sarah, and now he was running the same playbook with my daughter. Charm, control, isolate, possess. But there was one crucial difference. Sarah had tried to leave, and Sarah had disappeared. Jessica hadn't tried to leave yet. She was still in the golden cage, still believing the bars were made of love instead of fear. That was why she was still walking around, still smiling, still inviting me to dinner. But what happened when the cage stopped feeling golden? What happened when Jessica woke up, like Sarah had, and realized she was married to a monster? I pulled out Sarah's journal again, flipping to the entries near the end. Her handwriting grew more frantic with each page, the writing of a woman who could feel the walls closing in. September 28, 2021. I think he knows I'm planning to leave. He looks at me differently now, like I'm a problem to be solved. Yesterday, he came home early and found me on the phone with Emily. He didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway and smiled. That smile haunts my dreams. The 3rd of October, 2021. He took me to the cabin this weekend, said it would be romantic, but he spent hours in that locked room while I sat alone in the living room. When he came out, he was sweating. His hands were dirty. What is he building down there? What is he building down there? Sarah had asked that question 3 years ago. Now I knew the answer. Her tomb, her prison, the place where she'd spent 1,000 days in darkness, waiting for someone to find her. I thought about Ethan's search history. How long before a body decomposes in a sealed container? He wasn't searching that for Sarah, not yet. Sarah was still alive, still imprisoned, still useful somehow. But for how much longer? Maybe he was planning to replace her, to upgrade from Sarah to Jessica, to dispose of the old model and install the new one. The thought made me physically sick. My phone rang. Tommy, Chen, Detective Donovan. His voice was breathless, excited. I found something. Something I missed before. What is it? Sarah's phone records. The ones from the week before she disappeared. I was looking at them again, and I noticed she made a call to a number I don't recognize. A Portland number. She talked for 12 minutes. Who was it? I don't know. But I traced the number. It's registered to a woman named Linda Marsh. She works at Crosstech. Crosstech. Ethan's company. Why would Sarah be calling someone at her husband's company? That's what I thought. So I looked up Linda Marsh. Tommy's voice dropped. She doesn't exist anymore, detective. She quit Crosstech 2 weeks after Sarah disappeared. Left Portland entirely. No forwarding address. No social media. Nothing. A witness. Someone who knew something. Someone who'd run. Can you find her? I've been trying for 2 years. It's like she vanished off the face of the earth. Tommy paused. But I did find one thing. An old LinkedIn profile, archived before she deleted it. She was Ethan's executive assistant. She worked directly for him. Executive assistant. Someone who would have access to his calendar, his files, his secrets. She saw something, I said. Something that scared her enough to run. That's what I think. If we could find her, if she'd talk, we'd have a witness. Someone who could corroborate everything, the missing piece. The puzzle was almost complete. Keep looking for Linda Marsh, I told Tommy. After I hung up, I sat staring at my war room. Sarah, Jessica, Ethan, the cabin, the bunker, the pattern, and now Linda Marsh, a ghost who'd vanished because she knew too much. How many lives had Ethan Cross touched with his darkness? How many people had he controlled, manipulated, destroyed? I thought about what Carmen had said. Organized, methodical, patient. Ethan didn't make mistakes. He planned everything, controlled everything, eliminated every loose end. Except me. He didn't know I was coming. He didn't know I'd seen his phone, found his pattern, traced his bunker. He thought I was just a confused old father, trying to reconnect with his estranged daughter. That was his mistake, and I was going to make him pay for every day he'd kept Sarah Chen in that hole. For every moment of fear he'd inflicted on my daughter. For every woman he'd ever looked at and seen not a person, but a possession. The hunter was about to become the hunted. He just didn't know it yet. You don't know him like I do, Dad. Jessica's voice was sharp, defensive, but her hands were shaking. Saturday dinner arrived faster than I wanted. I'd spent the week gathering evidence, building my case, preparing for the moment when I'd have to tell my daughter the truth about her husband. But standing on her doorstep, watching her open the door with that practiced smile. How do you tell your child that the man she loves is a monster? Ethan was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with the precision of a surgeon. He looked up when I entered, flashing that perfect smile. Mike, great to see you again. Jess has been talking about this dinner all week. Wouldn't miss it, I said. The evening proceeded like a carefully choreographed dance. Ethan was charming, attentive, everything a father would want in a son-in-law. He asked about my career, my hobbies, my plans for retirement. He refilled my wine glass before it was empty and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. But I was watching. I saw how his hand rested on Jessica's lower back, not affectionately, but possessively. How his eyes tracked her movements even when he was talking to me. How she glanced at him before answering questions, as if seeking permission. After dinner, Ethan excused himself for another work call. The moment he stepped outside, I made my move. Jess, can we talk? Just the two of us? She was loading the dishwasher, her movements mechanical. Sure, Dad. What's up? I took a deep breath. I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think before you answer. Jessica's hands stilled on a plate. She didn't turn around. Are you happy? Really happy? Of course I'm happy. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Who else is asking? Nina. She's been sending weird texts, acting like something's wrong. Jessica finally turned, and I saw frustration in her eyes. I don't understand why no one can just be happy for me. I found a great guy. I have a beautiful house. My life is perfect. Perfect, I repeated. You used to hate that word. You used to say perfect was boring. People change, Dad. Do they? Or do they just learn to hide? Jessica's expression hardened. What are you trying to say? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photo Tommy had given me. Sarah Chen, on her wedding day. Do you recognize this woman? Jessica frowned at the screen. No. Should I? Her name is Sarah Chen. She was Ethan's first wife. The color drained from Jessica's face. That's not. Ethan was never married before. He told me I was his first. He lied. Sarah Chen married Ethan Cross 4 years ago. 3 years ago, she disappeared. The police think she died in a hiking accident, but her body was never found. I held her gaze. Her father thinks Ethan killed her. That's insane. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Ethan wouldn't. He's not. Look at the photo, Jess. Really? Look. She stared at Sarah's image, and I watched the recognition dawn in her eyes. The same height, the same hair, the same smile. She looks like me, Jessica breathed. He has a type. Women who are independent, successful, beautiful. Women he can control and isolate and possess. I took her hands, feeling them tremble in mine. Jess, I've been investigating Ethan all week. He has a cabin in the Cascades with an underground bunker. He visits it every 2 weeks, on a schedule, for 3 years. His search history on his phone. I saw it. Sweetheart. He was looking up body decomposition, how to hide DNA evidence. No. Jessica pulled away. No. You're wrong. You're seeing things that aren't there. You're a cop. You see criminals everywhere. I was a cop. And that instinct is what kept me alive for 25 years. I stepped closer. Jess, please. I know you love him. I know this is hard to hear, but I'm not making this up. Sarah Chen is real. The bunker is real. The search history is real. Why are you doing this? Tears streamed down her face. You weren't there for my childhood. You missed my graduation. You weren't at my wedding. And now you show up and try to destroy my marriage? The words hit like bullets, each one deserved. You're right, I said quietly. I wasn't there. I failed you in every way a father can fail. And I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry, Jess. But I'm here now, and I'm not going to let you disappear like Sarah did. Jessica opened her mouth to respond, but something stopped her. A flicker of memory crossing her face. Sarah, she whispered. He says that name sometimes. In his sleep. I asked him about it once. He got angry. Really angry. Said it was just a dream. When did he start saying it? A few months ago. Right around the time. She trailed off. Around the time what? Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small. Around the time he started asking me to go to the cabin with him. Every weekend, he asks. I keep saying no, I don't like it there. It's too isolated. No phone service. And there's this room he keeps locked. My heart stopped. What room? In the floor of the storage closet. A hatch. He says it's a storm shelter, but I've never seen inside. He says it's not safe. There's equipment down there. Tools. Sharp things. Her voice cracked. Dad. Why does he want me to go to the cabin so badly? I couldn't answer that question. Not truthfully. Not without destroying her completely. Jess, I said carefully. I need you to do something for me. Something important. What? I need you to check Ethan's GPS. His car. See where he's been going on Saturdays. That's spying on my husband. It's protecting yourself. I held her gaze. If I'm wrong, you'll see his trips to the office, to the gym, to normal places. And I'll apologize and never bring this up again. But if I'm right, Jessica stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll check. The back door opened. Ethan stepped inside, shaking rain from his hair. What did I miss? He asked brightly. Jessica's eyes met mine. And in them, I saw something new. Doubt. The call came at 11:47 p.m. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Dad, you were right. Something's wrong. I'd been staring at the ceiling for hours, unable to sleep, waiting for something I couldn't name. When my phone lit up with Jessica's number, my heart nearly stopped. Jess? What happened? I checked the GPS. Like you asked. Her voice trembled on the edge of breaking. He told me he was in Seattle this weekend. A conference. But his car. Dad. His car was in the mountains. The same location. Every Saturday. For 3 years. I sat up in bed, my pulse pounding. Are you safe? Where is he now? He's asleep. I'm in the bathroom. I locked the door. A shaky breath. I've been looking at the history for an hour. It's always the same pattern. He leaves around noon, drives for 2 hours, stays for 4 or 5 hours, then comes home. Every 2 weeks. Like clockwork. Like clockwork. Just like Carmen had said. Jess, listen to me carefully. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you saw anything. Can you do that? I don't know. Her voice cracked. Dad, who is he? Who did I marry? The question hung in the darkness between us. I wanted to tell her everything about Sarah, about the bunker, about the horror waiting beneath that cabin floor. But not like this. Not over the phone while she was trapped in a bathroom with a monster sleeping in the next room. I'll tell you everything, I said. But not tonight. Tomorrow, I need you to find a reason to leave the house. Tell him you're meeting Nina for lunch. Tell him anything, but get somewhere safe. And call me, okay? A pause. Dad, there's something else. What? I found some of his old photos. On a hard drive he keeps in his office. He doesn't know I know the password. Her voice dropped even lower. There were pictures of Sarah, recent ones. From the last few months, my blood turned to ice. What kind of pictures? She looked different, thin, pale, like she'd been sick for a long time. But Dad, she was alive. In the pictures, she was alive. Sarah Chen. Alive. After 3 years, I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles ached. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure it was recent? The files were dated. The most recent one was from last Saturday. Jessica's breath hitched. She's in some kind of room. Concrete walls, a small bed, books everywhere. It looks like a cell. A cell. 800 square feet of concrete and steel, hidden beneath a cabin in the Cascades. Did Ethan see you find these? No. He was in the shower. I put everything back exactly how it was. She was crying now, trying to muffle the sound. Dad, what do I do? That woman, she's been missing for 3 years. Everyone thinks she's dead, and my husband has pictures of her locked in a room. Can you copy the files? Get them off that hard drive without him noticing? I think so. He has a work trip tomorrow, early morning. He'll be gone by 7. Do it. Copy everything. Then get out of that house and come straight to me. Just walk out like you're going for coffee and don't look back. He'll know something's wrong. Her voice was high, panicked. He always knows. He knows everything. Not this time. This time, we're ahead of him. A long silence. Then Jessica spoke again, her voice steadier now. Dad, when I was checking the GPS, I found something else. He's got a trip planned for next Saturday. Same location, but he added a note in his calendar. What does it say? Final arrangements. She took a shaky breath. What does that mean? Final arrangements for what? Final arrangements. My mind raced through the possibilities, each one worse than the last. Body decomposition in a sealed container. It means we're running out of time, I said grimly. Jess, I need you to stay calm for one more night. Can you do that? Can you get through tonight without letting him see that anything's changed? I don't know if I can look at him. Knowing what I know, you can. You're stronger than you realize. I thought about all the years I'd missed, all the moments I should have been there to tell her how proud I was. You're my daughter, and my daughter doesn't break. A small, wet laugh. You don't even know me, Dad. Not really. Then give me a chance to fix that. Starting tomorrow. Starting with getting you out of that house. Okay. She exhaled slowly. Okay. I can do this. I love you, Jess. I know I haven't said it enough. I know I haven't earned the right to say it. But I love you. Silence. Then, so quiet, I almost missed it. I love you too. Dad. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Sarah Chen was alive. 3 years in a concrete cell, and she was still alive. Ethan had been visiting her every 2 weeks, bringing supplies, taking pictures like some twisted trophy collection. But now, he was planning something. Final arrangements. That could only mean one thing. He was going to kill her. I had 6 days. 6 days to rescue Sarah, before Ethan disposed of her like yesterday's garbage. 6 days to get my daughter away from a monster. 6 days to bring down a man who'd been hiding his crimes for 3 years. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Carmen. Emergency. Sarah Chen, confirmed alive. Photos found on Ethan's hard drive dated last week. He's planning something for next Saturday. Calendar note. Final arrangements. We need to move now. Then I started packing. Flashlight. First aid kit. Bolt cutters. The gun I kept in my nightstand that I'd hoped I'd never need again. 6 days. The countdown had begun. Day 3. The countdown had become a drumbeat in my skull. I parked my truck a quarter mile from Ethan's cabin, hidden behind a dense wall of Douglas firs that had been standing since before I was born. The September rain had stopped, but the forest still dripped a constant percussion that masked my footsteps as I made my way through the underbrush. Carmen's voice crackled through my earpiece. I've got eyes on the main road. No movement yet. Copy, I whispered. The cabin looked different in daylight, less like a vacation retreat, more like what it really was. A prison. The windows were dark, curtains drawn. Ethan's Tesla wasn't in the driveway, but that didn't mean he wasn't here. The building permits Carmen had found showed a separate underground entrance, accessible from inside the cabin, but also from a concealed hatch somewhere in the surrounding woods. I needed to find that hatch. For 3 hours, I searched. Methodically, grid by grid, the way I'd been trained to search crime scenes 30 years ago. My knees ached. My back screamed, but I kept going, because somewhere beneath this beautiful, rain-soaked forest, a woman had been screaming for 3 years, and no one had heard her. At 2:17 in the afternoon, I found it. The hatch was hidden beneath a fallen log that looked natural but wasn't. The wood had been deliberately placed, weathered to blend with the forest floor. Underneath, a steel door painted to match the surrounding earth sat flush with the ground. A keypad glowed faintly red. Carmen, I breathed. I found it. Location? I rattled off the coordinates. Underground entrance. Keypad lock. I need. The sound of tires on gravel made me freeze. Through the trees, I watched Ethan's Tesla glide up the driveway like a silver ghost. He stepped out, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something. Casual, relaxed, a man without a care in the world. A man who had kept a woman locked underground for 1,095 days. I pressed myself against the wet earth, barely breathing, as Ethan walked toward the cabin. He paused at the door, still talking, and for one horrible moment I thought he was looking directly at me. But then he laughed again, said something about a quarterly report, and disappeared inside. He's in, Carmen said. Mike, get out of there. Not yet. Mike, I need to see what he does. For 47 minutes, nothing happened. The cabin sat silent. The forest dripped. My muscles cramped from holding perfectly still. Then the front door opened. Ethan emerged carrying a cooler, the kind you'd use for a weekend fishing trip. He walked around the side of the cabin, out of my line of sight. I heard a metallic clang, a hiss of hydraulics, then silence. When he reappeared, the cooler was gone. He stood by the Tesla, checking his phone, and I saw something I'll never forget. A smile. Not the charming, camera-ready smile he showed the world. This was different, private, satisfied, the smile of a man visiting his trophy. Ethan drove away at 4:23. I waited 20 minutes to be sure, then made my way to where he'd disappeared. The entrance was elegant in its simplicity, a section of the cabin's foundation that swung outward on hidden hinges. Inside, concrete steps descended into darkness. The walls were smooth, professionally finished. This wasn't a makeshift prison. It was designed, engineered, built to last, built to keep secrets forever. I wanted to go down those stairs. Every cell in my body screamed to find Sarah, to end this nightmare, to bring her into the sunlight after 3 years in the dark. But I was one man, 62 years old, with no backup and no warrant. If Ethan returned and found me, I'd disappear into that bunker too. And then no one would save Sarah. No one would protect Jessica. I took photographs, documented everything. Then I made myself walk away. That night, I met Carmen at a diner off Highway 26. She'd brought coffee black, no sugar, the way I'd drunk it for 30 years, the way Margaret used to make it before the divorce. I found the entrance, I told her. Underground. Professional construction. He's keeping her down there, Carmen. I know it. Carmen stirred her coffee slowly. The photographs aren't enough for a warrant. Not from a retired cop conducting unauthorized surveillance. Then, what do? We need probable cause. Something that forces the department's hand. I showed her the photographs Jessica had sent. Sarah's face, pale but alive, staring at a camera in her concrete cell. This isn't probable cause? How did Jessica obtain these? From Ethan's computer. Carmen winced. Illegally? Accessed. Any defense attorney would get it thrown out in 5 seconds. So we need Ethan to show us, I said slowly. We need him to lead us there. Mike, what if someone called in an anonymous tip? What if a hiker reported hearing screaming in the woods near the cabin? Carmen set down her coffee. You're talking about manufacturing evidence. I'm talking about saving a woman's life. We sat in silence. Outside, rain began to fall again. Oregon's eternal tears. There's another way, Carmen finally said. Tommy Chen has been requesting the case be reopened for 3 years. If new evidence surfaces, evidence that wasn't obtained through illegal search, we might be able to get a warrant. What kind of evidence? Linda Marsh, Ethan's former assistant. She disappeared 2 weeks after Sarah. No one ever connected the cases. Carmen pulled out a folder. I did some digging. Linda's sister lives in Seattle. She's been trying to get someone to listen for years. You think Linda knew something? I think Linda knew everything. And I think Ethan made her disappear because of it. I looked at the photographs of Sarah alive, imprisoned, waiting, at Ethan's calendar note. Then we find Linda's sister, I said. Carmen nodded, gathering her things. I'll drive. As we walked into the rain, my phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Action, action, action. He knows something's wrong. Dad, I'm scared. He keeps asking about you. The hunter had become the hunted. But now, so had we. Seattle greeted us with the kind of rain that felt personal, cold, relentless, accusatory. Linda Marsh's sister lived in a modest apartment in Capitol Hill, the kind of place where artists and activists gathered before the tech money pushed them out. Her name was Rebecca, and she answered the door with the hollow eyes of someone who'd stopped expecting good news a long time ago. Rebecca Marsh? Carmen showed her badge, technically expired, but civilians rarely checked. We're investigating your sister's disappearance. Rebecca's face crumpled. 3 years. 3 years I've been telling the police something was wrong. They said, Linda, just Left. Needed a fresh start. She laughed, bitterly. Linda didn't need a fresh start. Linda needed someone to believe her. She invited us in. The apartment was small but warm, filled with photographs. Linda smiled from every wall, at graduation, at a beach, at what looked like a company party. In one photo, she stood next to a man I recognized instantly, Ethan Cross. She worked for him, Rebecca said, following my gaze. Executive assistant at Crosstech. Best job she ever had, she said. Until it wasn't. What changed? Rebecca pulled a box from her closet, the kind families keep when someone vanishes, filled with the scraps of a life interrupted. Linda called me 2 days before she disappeared. She was terrified. Said she'd found something at Ethan's cabin. Something she wasn't supposed to see. My heart stopped. What did she find? She wouldn't tell me over the phone. Said it was too dangerous. Said she needed to talk to someone first, a woman named Sarah. Rebecca's voice cracked. Sarah Chen, Ethan's wife. But when Linda tried to contact her, Sarah had already disappeared. Carmen and I exchanged glances. The timeline was crystallizing. Sarah vanishes October 15th. Linda calls Sarah's number 12 minutes before her own disappearance, October 29th. 2 women, connected to Ethan, gone within 2 weeks. Linda left me something, Rebecca continued. She reached into the box and pulled out a USB drive, tarnished with age. She mailed it 2 days before she vanished. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to the police. Her jaw tightened. I did. They said there was nothing actionable. Just corporate documents. May I? I extended my hand. Rebecca hesitated, then placed the drive in my palm. Find her, detective. Please. Find my sister. We drove to a 24-hour coffee shop and plugged the USB into Carmen's laptop. The files loaded slowly. Corporate spreadsheets, meeting notes, calendar entries, normal executive assistant documentation. Then I found the folder labeled Evidence. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Linda had documented everything. Building permits for the underground structure, receipts for soundproofing materials, purchase orders for industrial locks. And then, buried at the bottom, a video file. Carmen pressed play. The footage was shaky, filmed on a phone. Linda's voice, trembling. This is October 27th, 2021. I'm at Ethan Cross's cabin, in the Cascade Mountains. I followed him here because I heard something last week. Something that sounded like screaming. The camera panned across the cabin's interior normal, unremarkable until it reached the basement door. Linda's hand appeared, pushing it open. Stairs descended into darkness. Oh my God. Linda whispered on the recording. Oh my God. Oh my God. The camera captured a concrete room. 800 square feet. Bare bulb lighting. A cot. A bucket. And huddled in the corner, thin and pale and terrified, Sarah Chen. She looked at the camera with eyes that had seen too much darkness. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, footsteps echoed from above. He's coming! Linda gasped. The video cut to black. Carmen stared at the screen. This is it. This is the evidence we need. Carmen docs, and in makes dot. She filmed it 2 days before she disappeared. I said slowly. Ethan must have found out. Do you think she's... I thought about Ethan's calendar. Final arrangements. About the cooler he'd carried into the bunker. About the way he'd smiled afterward. A foreman's. I think we're running out of time for everyone. We drove through the night. Back to Portland. Back to the Cascade Mountains. Carmen called in every favor. She had a judge she'd helped years ago. A district attorney who owed her. By dawn, we had a warrant. But I couldn't wait for dawn. At 3:47 in the morning, I parked at the end of Ethan's driveway. His Tesla was gone. Jessica had texted 2 hours earlier. Back tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. Less than 24 hours before his final arrangements. Carmen's voice crackled through my phone. Mike, wait for backup. The warrant won't be signed until 6 a.m. Sarah's been down there for 3 years, Carmen. Linda might be down there too. I'm not waiting. Mike. I ended the call. The cabin was dark. Silent. The rain had stopped, and the forest held its breath as I approached the hidden entrance I'd found during surveillance. The keypad glowed red in the darkness. 4 digits. I had no idea what the code might be. Then I remembered Linda's video. The building permits. The date construction was completed. 0315, March 15th. The same date on Sarah's forged missing person report. I entered the code. The light turned green. The steel door swung open, revealing concrete stairs descending into absolute darkness. Cold air rushed up to meet me, stale, recycled, thick with the smell of confinement. I turned on my flashlight and began the descent. 23 steps. I counted each one. The walls pressed close, smooth concrete that absorbed sound and hope in equal measure. At the bottom, another door. Heavy steel, industrial grade, designed to contain screams. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped into Sarah Chen's prison. 800 square feet. Concrete walls. Bare bulb lighting that flickered when I entered. A cot. A small bathroom area with a curtain. A shelf with books, dozens of them. Their spines cracked from reading and rereading. And in the corner, pressed against the wall, a woman who hadn't seen sunlight in 1,097 days. Sarah? My voice cracked. She stared at me with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. My name is Mike Donovan, I said softly. I'm Jessica's father, and I'm here to take you home. She didn't scream. After 3 years in this concrete tomb, Sarah Chen had forgotten how. Instead, she pressed herself harder against the wall, her body folding into the smallest possible shape, a defense mechanism learned through 1,000 days of captivity. Her hair, once dark and lustrous in the photographs Tommy had shown me, hung limp and gray-streaked around a face that had aged decades in 36 months. Please, I said softly, keeping my distance. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a retired police detective. Your father sent me. At the word father, something flickered in her eyes. A memory. A hope she'd buried so deep, she'd forgotten it existed. My father? Her voice cracked from disuse, barely a whisper. He's still looking? He never stopped. Not for one single day. Sarah's composure shattered. She crumpled to the floor, and sounds emerged from her throat that weren't quite sobs. They were the release of 1,000 nights spent screaming into concrete. Finally given permission to be heard, I approached slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. When I reached her, I knelt down, keeping my hands visible. We need to go, I said gently. Ethan's in Seattle, but he could come back any time. Can you walk? Sarah nodded, though her legs trembled as I helped her stand. She was thin, too thin, but there was steel beneath the fragility. 3 years hadn't broken her. They'd forged her into something harder. Wait, she gasped, clutching my arm. My blood went cold. Linda Marsh? Ethan's assistant? Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She found me. 2 weeks after he put me down here. She was so brave she filmed everything. Promised to go to the police. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but Ethan caught her leaving. Where is she now? Sarah pointed to a section of the concrete wall. He made me watch. Made me understand what happens to people who try to help me. She was shaking now. She's behind that wall. Detective. He sealed her in 3 years ago. The horror of it washed over me like ice water. Linda Marsh hadn't disappeared. She'd been murdered entombed in the walls of the prison she'd tried to expose. I could hear him working for 2 days. Sarah continued, her voice hollow. The drilling, the concrete mixer, and then silence. She looked at me with eyes that had seen the architecture of hell. He told me if I ever tried to escape, I'd join her. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course not. Ethan had built this bunker to be invisible to the outside world. We're getting out of here, I said. Right now. I'll send a team back for Linda. I promise you, Sarah. He's going to pay for everything. Sarah gripped my hand with surprising strength. You don't understand. He has cameras everywhere. Motion sensors. The moment we step outside, I disabled what I could find on my way in. There's a backup system. In his car. If the Tesla is within 2 miles, it automatically receives alerts. Sarah's voice was urgent now, animated by fear, and something else, the desperate hope of someone who finally sees escape within reach. You have to call your people before we leave. The moment we're above ground, he'll know. I cursed under my breath. The Tesla. Ethan had driven it to Seattle. But what if he'd stopped? What if he was already on his way back? My partner is getting a warrant signed right now, I said. Police will be here by 6 a.m. Sarah glanced at a small clock on her shelf, the only way she'd been able to track time in this sunless prison. 4:17 a.m. Less than 2 hours. Then we wait, she said. We've waited 3 years. We can wait 2 more hours. But fate had other plans. A sound echoed through the bunker, the hydraulic hiss of the cabin entrance opening. Footsteps on concrete stairs. Sarah's face went white. He's back. I drew my weapon, my old service pistol that I'd carried for 30 years and had hoped never to fire again. No. This is the only entrance. Sarah's voice was steady now. The terror transformed into something colder. He designed it that way. The footsteps grew closer. Measured. Unhurried. The footsteps of a man who believed he was in complete control. I positioned myself between Sarah and the door, weapon raised. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, stay behind me. The door swung open, but it wasn't Ethan who stood in the doorway. It was Jessica. My daughter's face was pale, streaked with tears and rain. Behind her, illuminated by the bunker's harsh light, I could see the barrel of a gun pressed against her temple. And holding that gun, smiling the smile of a man whose mask had finally fallen. Ethan Cross. Well, he said pleasantly, pushing Jessica forward. Sarah made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a moan. The sound of someone watching their worst nightmare materialize. Dad, Jessica whispered. Her eyes were wide with terror, with betrayal, with the shattering of everything she'd believed about her husband. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you, but he... Shh. Ethan pressed the gun harder against her temple. Let the adults talk. Sweetheart, I kept my weapon trained on him, but the geometry was impossible. Any shot risked hitting Jessica. Ethan knew it. He'd positioned her perfectly, a human shield built from my own flesh and blood. You should have stayed retired, Mike, Ethan said conversationally. Spent your golden years fishing, watching sports. Whatever it is, old men do. When they accept, they're no longer relevant. His smile widened. Instead, you had to play hero. And now, look where we are. Let her go, Ethan. The police know everything. They have Linda's video. A warrant's being signed as we speak. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, surprise, quickly masked. Linda's video? She documented everything before you killed her. Your building permits. Your purchases. Sarah in this cell. I let that sink in. It's over. The only question is whether you add 2 more murders to your sentence. Ethan's smile never wavered. 3. He corrected. The question is whether I add 3. Time moves differently when your daughter has a gun to her head. Every second stretched into eternity. Every breath felt like my last. The bunker's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Ethan's face. A face I'd seen smile at my daughter's wedding, kiss her cheek at family dinners, promise to love her forever. The face of a monster wearing a husband's mask. Here's what's going to happen, Ethan said, his voice eerily calm. You're going to put down your weapon. Then, you're going to join Sarah against that wall. And then we're all going to have a conversation about the future. What future? I kept my gun steady, looking for any angle, any opportunity. The police have everything. Ethan, Linda's video, the building permits. Sarah's father has been collecting evidence for 3 years. You're done. Am I? Ethan tilted his head, genuinely curious. See, I don't think so. I think what happens next is tragic murder-suicide. Retired detective, consumed by paranoid delusions about his daughter's husband, breaks into a private cabin. He finds a mentally disturbed homeless woman he believes to be a kidnapping victim. When confronted by the homeowner and his wife, the detective snaps, shoots everyone, then himself. He smiled. I'll be the grieving widower. Again, Jessica whimpered. Ethan, please, I said quiet. He pressed the gun harder against her temple. You know, Jessica, I really did love you. In my way. But you had to go snooping, didn't you? Had to look at my computer. Had to call Daddy. His voice hardened. You ruined everything. Behind me, Sarah spoke for the first time since Ethan entered. Her voice was steady, unnaturally so. Ethan. He looked past me, and something shifted in his expression. Hunger. Possession. The look of a collector admiring his favorite piece. Hello, Sarah. Miss me? Every day, she said flatly. Every single day. I thought about you. About what you did to me. About what you did to Linda. She stepped forward, and I felt her hand brush against my back, a signal. You know what kept me alive down here? Knowing that someday, someone would find me, and you'd finally face what you are. Ethan laughed. And what am I? Small. Sarah's voice dripped with contempt. You're a small, pathetic man who can only feel powerful by caging women, by controlling them, by killing them when they try to leave. She took another step. Linda figured you out in 2 weeks. I figured you out in 2 months. And now Jessica knows too. 3 women. Ethan. 3 women who saw through your mask. I felt it then, Sarah's hand closing around something in my back pocket. The backup knife Carmen had insisted I carry. I kept my eyes on Ethan, kept my weapon raised, giving her cover. You think you're special? Ethan's voice had lost its pleasant veneer. Raw anger seeped through. You think any of you matter? You're replaceable. All of you. There's always another woman who'll believe the charm, fall for the smile, sign the paperwork. He gestured with the gun, a momentary lapse. You're nothing. Sarah moved. 3 years of captivity had given her something Ethan never anticipated. Patience. Endurance. The coiled readiness of a survivor who had been waiting for exactly this moment. She lunged past me, knife flashing in the fluorescent light. Ethan's reflexes were quick. He swung the gun toward her, but Jessica was quicker. My daughter drove her elbow into Ethan's ribs with a force born of betrayal and rage. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second, and Jessica twisted away, dropping to the floor. I fired. The shot caught Ethan in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The gun flew from his hand, clattering across the concrete. Sarah was on him instantly, the knife pressed against his throat, her eyes blazing with 3 years of fury. Give me a reason, she hissed. Please, give me one reason, Sarah. I approached carefully, keeping my weapon trained on Ethan. Don't. He's not worth spending the rest of your life in prison. You don't know what he did to me. Tears streamed down her face, but her hand didn't waver. You don't know what it's like to hear him walking down those stairs. Not knowing if today's the day he decides you're not useful anymore. I know. I knelt beside her, my voice soft. I know, Sarah, and I promise you, he's going to spend the rest of his life in a cell, just like this one. Cold, concrete, alone. I met her eyes. Let him live with that. Let him understand what it feels like. For a long moment, I thought she'd do it anyway. The knife pressed deeper, drawing a thin line of blood across Ethan's throat. He whimpered, actually whimpered, and I saw the mask crumble completely. Underneath was nothing but a coward. Sarah saw it too. She pulled back the knife and spat in his face. You're not worth it, she said. You're not worth anything. I secured Ethan with zip ties from my pocket while Jessica stumbled toward us, sobbing. She collapsed into Sarah's arms, two women who'd never met, bound together by the same monster. "I'm sorry," Jessica kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know. It's not your fault." Sarah held her tightly. "He's very good at hiding what he is." My phone buzzed, signal restored as we climbed the stairs. Carmen's name flashed on the screen. "Mike." The warrant's signed. "We're en route. Ida, 15 minutes. Are you?" "We're en route." "One of you, team." "We're en route." "I have them," I said, my voice breaking. "Both of them." "Sarah's alive, Carmen. She's alive." Silence. Then, "Oh, thank God. Thank God." We emerged from the bunker into the gray light of dawn. The rain had stopped, and the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds over the Cascades. Sarah shielded her eyes. She hadn't seen the sun in 1097 days. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Jessica held my hand. Sarah breathed free air for the first time in 3 years. And somewhere below us, in the concrete tomb he'd built to cage others, Ethan Cross waited for justice to find him. "Dad," Jessica said quietly. "Thank you." I pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine. "Always," I said. "Always." The sirens arrived with the sunrise. 6 police cruisers tore up the mountain road, their lights painting the forest in alternating red and blue. Carmen was first out of the lead vehicle, her weapon drawn, scanning the scene until her eyes found mine. "Mike." She holstered her gun and ran toward us. Jesus Christ. "Mike." I was sitting on the cabin's front steps, Jessica on one side, Sarah on the other. Both women were wrapped in emergency blankets I'd found in my truck. Neither had spoken since we emerged from the bunker. Some experiences are too heavy for words. "He's inside," I said. "Basement entrance, through the main room. Gunshot wound to the right shoulder, non-fatal. Zip-tied to a support beam." Carmen nodded to her team, and 4 officers disappeared into the cabin. She crouched in front of Sarah, her voice gentle. "Sarah Chen? I'm Detective Carmen Reyes. Your father is on his way. He should be here within the hour." Sarah's composure finally cracked. She buried her face in her hands, and her shoulders shook with silent sobs. 3 years of waiting, 3 years of hoping, and now it was real. "There's something else," I said quietly. "In the bunker." Sarah told me. I glanced at her, but she nodded for me to continue. "Linda Marsh, Ethan's former assistant. She's in the walls." "Carmen." He sealed her in after she found Sarah. Carmen's face went pale. "Oh God, we need a forensic team. Ground-penetrating radar. Whatever it takes." I met her eyes. Linda's sister deserves to bring her home. The next hours blurred together like watercolors in rain. Forensic teams arrived. The bunker was photographed, catalogued, processed. A cadaver dog confirmed what Sarah had told us: there were human remains behind the eastern wall. The drilling began at noon. I stayed with Jessica while they worked. My daughter hadn't stopped trembling since we left the bunker. Every few minutes, she'd look at me with those hollow eyes and ask the same question. How did I not know? I didn't have an answer. Some monsters wear their masks so well that even the people who share their beds never see what's underneath. At 2:17 in the afternoon, they brought Ethan out. He'd been treated by paramedics, his shoulder bandaged, his wrists cuffed in front. 2 officers flanked him as they walked him toward a waiting cruiser. He moved slowly, deliberately, and when he passed the porch where we sat, he stopped. Jessica. His voice was soft, tender, the voice he'd used to say, "I love you," 1,000 times. "Sweetheart, you have to understand. Don't." Jessica's voice was ice. "Don't you dare call me that. Everything I did for us, for our future. Sarah was a mistake from my past. I was trying to protect you from what?" Jessica stood, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not fear, not sorrow, rage. From the woman you kept in a cage for 3 years? From the woman you murdered and sealed in a wall? She stepped closer, and the officers tensed. You're not a husband, Ethan. You're not even human. You're a thing. A broken, empty thing that pretends to feel because it doesn't know how. Ethan's mask flickered. For just a moment, I saw what Sarah had described, the emptiness beneath, the void where a soul should be. I loved you, he said quietly. You don't know what love is. The officers pulled him away. As they loaded him into the cruiser, Ethan looked back one final time, not at Jessica, but at Sarah, and he smiled. That smile would haunt me for years. At 4 o'clock, Tommy Chen arrived. I'll never forget the sound he made when he saw his daughter, a sound that wasn't quite human, torn from somewhere deeper than the throat. He ran to her. This 73-year-old man who'd spent 3 years refusing to give up hope. And he held her like she might disappear if he let go. My baby, he kept saying. My baby girl. You're alive. You're alive. Sarah clung to him with the same desperate strength. I knew you'd find me, Dad. I knew you wouldn't stop. Never. Tommy's voice broke. I would never stop. Not in a million years. I watched them from a distance, giving them privacy, and felt Jessica's hand slip into mine. That's what a father does, she said softly. He never stops. I squeezed her hand. Never. At sunset, they found Linda. The forensic team had to remove an entire section of concrete wall, revealing a space barely 3 feet wide. Linda Marsh had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, placed in a seated position with her knees drawn to her chest. The medical examiner estimated she'd been dead for approximately 3 years, killed within days of filming the video that would eventually bring Ethan down. Rebecca Marsh arrived at 7. Carmen had called her, personally. I watched her approach the bunker entrance, watched her face as they told her what they'd found. She didn't collapse, didn't scream. She simply nodded, as if she'd known all along, as if she'd been preparing for this moment since the day her sister disappeared. Can I see her? Rebecca asked. Not yet. But soon. I promise. Rebecca turned to me. You're the detective? The one who found her? I just followed the trail she left, I said. Linda's video, the one she mailed you, that's what broke the case. She saved Sarah's life. Even from beyond the grave, she saved her. Tears streamed down Rebecca's face, but she smiled through them. That was Linda. Always trying to help. Always trying to do the right thing. She took my hand. Thank you. Thank you for not forgetting her. The sun set over the Cascades, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The forensic teams continued their work. The police processed their evidence, and somewhere in a holding cell in Portland, Ethan Cross sat alone in silence, finally experiencing a fraction of what he'd inflicted on others. But for Sarah, and for Jessica, justice was just beginning. The trial of Ethan Michael Cross began on a gray November morning, 6 weeks after we pulled Sarah from that concrete tomb. Multnomah County Courthouse was packed. Every seat filled, every aisle crowded with reporters and cameras and the morbidly curious. The case had become national news. The charming tech CEO who'd kept his first wife imprisoned for 3 years while married to his second. Cable networks ran hour-long specials. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Ethan Cross had become America's newest monster. I sat in the third row, between Carmen and Tommy Chen. Jessica was 2 rows ahead, close to the prosecutor's table. She'd insisted on attending every day, watching every moment. I need to see this through, she'd told me. I need to see him pay. Sarah would testify today. The prosecution had built an airtight case. Linda's video, the building permits, the USB drive full of evidence, the forensic analysis of Linda's remains, cause of death, blunt force trauma to the skull, followed by asphyxiation. The toxicology reports showing traces of sedatives in the bunker's water supply. The GPS records proving Ethan visited the cabin every 2 weeks for 3 years. Like clockwork. But the jury needed to hear from Sarah. They needed to see the human cost of Ethan's crimes. She entered the courtroom at 10:15, walking slowly but steadily. 6 weeks of sunlight and freedom had brought color back to her cheeks, but her eyes still carried shadows, the kind that never fully fade. Tommy gripped my arm as she passed, his breathing shallow. Sarah took the witness stand and was sworn in. The prosecutor, a sharp-featured woman named Helen Vasquez, approached gently. "Miss Chen, can you describe for the jury what happened on October 15th, 2021? Sarah's voice was steady. She'd practiced this, prepared for it. But nothing truly prepares you to relive your worst nightmare in front of strangers. "I was leaving for Seattle," she began. "I'd filed for divorce 3 days earlier. Ethan didn't know I'd used a lawyer in another state, kept everything secret. I was scared of how he'd react." She paused. "I should have been more scared. What happened when you tried to leave?" "He was waiting at the front door, smiling. He said, 'Going somewhere, sweetheart?' I tried to run, but he grabbed me, put something over my face, a cloth with chemicals. I woke up in the bunker. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing." "Can you describe the bunker?" Sarah's jaw tightened. 800 square feet. Concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceiling, one light bulb, a cot, a toilet with no door, no windows, no sunlight. Her voice cracked. "He'd designed it perfectly. Soundproof, escape-proof. A cage built specifically to hold a human being." "How long were you held there?" 1,097 days. Sarah looked directly at Ethan for the first time. He sat at the defense table, wearing a tailored suit, his expression carefully neutral. 3 years. 3 years of darkness. 3 years of wondering if today was the day he'd decide I wasn't useful anymore. "Did he visit you?" "Every 2 weeks. Sometimes more." Sarah's hands trembled, but her voice held. "He'd bring food, books, sometimes clothes. He'd talk about his life, his work, his travels, his new wife." Her eyes flickered to Jessica. He'd describe their dates, their vacations, their wedding, in detail, like he was showing off. "Did he ever threaten you?" "Constantly. He said if I ever tried to escape, he'd kill me and bury me in the walls." Sarah's voice dropped, like he did to Linda. The defense attorney objected hearsay, prejudicial, but Judge Morrison overruled. The jury had already seen the photographs of Linda's remains. Some evidence speaks for itself. "Can you tell us about Linda Marsh?" Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears streamed down her face. "Linda found me 2 weeks after Ethan put me in the bunker. She'd been suspicious, noticed things at work, followed him to the cabin. She filmed me, promised to go to the police." Sarah's voice broke completely. 2 days later, Ethan brought her down the stairs. "He made me watch while She couldn't finish. Helen Vasquez waited, giving her time. "He killed her with a hammer," Sarah finally said. "Then he spent 2 days sealing her in the wall. I could hear him working, drilling, mixing concrete. And when he was done, he looked at me and said, 'That's what happens to people who try to help you.'" The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs. One woman in the gallery openly sobbing. Judge Morrison called for order, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Ethan Cross for what he truly was. The defense tried. Of course they tried. They argued diminished capacity, a personality disorder that prevented Ethan from understanding the consequences of his actions. They brought in psychiatrists who spoke of narcissistic traits and attachment issues. They painted him as mentally ill rather than evil. But Sarah's testimony had already sealed his fate. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a firm voice, read the verdicts aloud. On the charge of kidnapping in the 1st degree, guilty. Tommy Chen squeezed my hand. On the charge of false imprisonment, guilty. Jessica bowed her head. On the charge of murder in the 1st degree, in the death of Linda Marie Marsh, Guilty. Rebecca Marsh, sitting 3 rows behind us, let out a single sob. On the charge of attempted murder. In the case of Sarah Elizabeth Chen, guilty. Sarah didn't react. She'd known. We'd all known. But hearing it spoken aloud, watching the word guilty land on Ethan Cross like a hammer, felt like the first breath after drowning. Judge Morrison's scheduled sentencing for December. The prosecution recommended life without parole. 2 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 40 years. Ethan would die in prison. He would never see sunlight again, just like Sarah hadn't. For 1,097 days. As the bailiffs led Ethan away, he turned one last time. His eyes found mine across the courtroom, and for a moment, the mask slipped completely. I saw rage, hatred, the fury of a predator who'd finally been caged. I held his gaze. Didn't blink. Didn't look away. Enjoy your concrete walls, I said quietly. He couldn't hear me. But I think he understood. 6 months later, I stood on the shore of Cannon Beach, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. The ocean had always been Margaret's favorite place, my ex-wife, not the victim from my other case. She'd loved the way the waves never stopped, never gave up, just kept coming no matter what obstacles stood in their way. Like hope, she used to say. Hope never stops either. I hadn't believed her then. I'd been too consumed by the job, by the darkness I encountered every day, by the monsters that wore human faces. But standing here now, with the salt wind in my hair and the sound of my daughter's laughter behind me, I finally understood. Hope never stops, even when we forget how to feel it. Dad, come look. I turned to see Jessica crouched by a tide pool, pointing excitedly at something beneath the surface. She looked different now, lighter, somehow, as if the weight she'd been carrying had finally begun to lift. The divorce from Ethan had been finalized 3 months ago. She'd gone back to her maiden name, sold everything he'd ever given her, donated the proceeds to a domestic violence shelter. She was rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, but rebuilding nonetheless. What did you find? I asked, kneeling beside her. A starfish. She pointed to the orange creature clinging to a rock. Did you know they can regenerate? If they lose an arm, they just grow it back. I looked at my daughter, at the strength in her eyes, at the smile that had taken months to return, and felt something crack open in my chest. Yeah, I said softly. I've heard that. Sarah Chen was doing better too. She'd spent the first 2 months after her rescue in intensive therapy, learning to exist in a world that had continued without her for 3 years. The adjustment was brutal. She'd missed her mother's funeral, her best friend's wedding, the birth of her cousin's twins. 3 years of life. Stolen. 3 years of memories she'd never share. But Sarah was a fighter. She'd survived 1,097 days in darkness. She could survive anything. Last month, she'd published an essay in The Atlantic, What I Learned in the Dark. It went viral within hours. Millions of people read her words, shared her story, found strength in her resilience. A literary agent had contacted her about a book deal, a survivor's memoir, a beacon for others who'd experienced similar horrors. I want to turn my pain into something meaningful, she'd told me over coffee last week. I want other victims to know they're not alone, that there's always a way out, even when you can't see it. She'd also reconnected with her father. Tommy Chen had moved into a small apartment near Sarah's new place in Seattle. They had dinner together every Sunday, rebuilding the relationship that Ethan had tried to destroy. Tommy looked 10 years younger now. The weight of 3 years of searching, of hoping, of refusing to give up, it had finally lifted. You gave me my daughter back, he'd said to me at the sentencing hearing, tears streaming down his weathered face. I can never repay that. You already have, I'd replied, by never giving up, by believing when everyone else had stopped. Even Carmen had found a kind of peace. She'd come out of retirement officially now, consulting on cold cases for the Portland PD. The Cross case had reminded her why she'd become a detective in the first place. Not for the glory, not for the paycheck, but for the victims, for the families who deserved answers, for the monsters who deserved cages. We met for coffee every Thursday morning, talked about cases, about life, about the strange journey that had brought us both to this point. She was the best partner I'd ever had, and now, in retirement, she was becoming something more, a friend. Rebecca Marsh had finally laid her sister to rest. The funeral was small, just family, a few close friends, and 2 retired detectives who'd promised to find her. Linda was buried in a cemetery overlooking the Columbia River, her headstone inscribed with words Rebecca had chosen. She tried to help. She never stopped trying. I visited sometimes, left flowers, told Linda that her bravery hadn't been in vain, that her video, her evidence, her courage had brought down a monster and saved a woman's life. I hoped she could hear me, wherever she was. As for Ethan Cross, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms plus 47 years, to be served at Oregon State Penitentiary's maximum security unit. No possibility of parole, no chance of early release. He would spend the rest of his existence in a concrete cell, surrounded by walls he couldn't escape. Poetic justice, some might call it. I called it the bare minimum. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky exploded in shades of purple and pink. Jessica stood beside me now, her arm linked through mine, watching the last light fade. "Dad," she said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me, for seeing the truth when I couldn't." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "For being my father." I pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine, the same heartbeat I'd felt when the nurse first placed her in my arms 31 years ago. My daughter, my miracle, my reason for everything. "I'd do it all again," I said. 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. "I know." She smiled through tears. "That's what makes you, you." We stood there as darkness fell, father and daughter, watching the stars emerge one by one. The ocean whispered its eternal song. The wind carried the scent of salt and possibility. And somewhere in the distance, a lighthouse began to glow, a beacon in the darkness, guiding lost souls home. A 90 silver. Reteam Diazio, however. I thought about all the cases I'd worked over 30 years, all the victims I'd failed to save, all the monsters I'd failed to catch. The guilt had nearly destroyed me once, but standing here now, I realized something important. You can't save everyone, but you can save someone. And sometimes, that someone is enough. Sarah was free. Jessica was healing. Linda had been found. And me? I was finally learning to forgive myself. The lighthouse beam swept across the water, steady and sure. I watched it turn, again and again, cutting through the darkness with patient, unwavering light. Some graves are above ground, I'd learned, but so is redemption, so is hope, so is love.